Corporate South Africa was brought kicking and screaming into the new South Africa. Even till today, they have not come to terms with the new South Africa. And so the idea was, I thought, why not let's divest the various ad agency and marketing companies of what little black talent they had. And we said, no, man, this doesn't make sense. We have to present the way things could be. So it's about time we also, as black communities, must begin to look after our own infrastructure. We must do things for ourselves and not look to politicians.
Who is Peter Vundla? Welcome to the LeadingSelf podcast. My name is Gugulethu Makletuga. I am your host. This is our very first episode of the LeadingSelf podcast. And we are excited to have one of the doyens of business in South Africa, Mr. Peter Vundla. But before we get to Peter and talk about his life, just to tell you that the reason behind this podcast is to celebrate leadership. It is also to celebrate and profile some of the best leaders we have in the country, and also hopefully in future episodes, leaders around the world, around the continent, and to also profile some of the challenges that we face in our society based on decisions that leaders take. So this is about leadership. It's about leadership in business, leadership in civil society, and potentially leadership in politics, but flagging and highlighting the impact of leadership and leaders in our society. So as I said earlier, we have Peter Vundla, who is a doyen of business, but also he's known as the ad man. And I think it's a title that he probably wears with pride. Peter, welcome to the LeadingSelf podcast.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And your life is probably very exciting. And I was telling you earlier that I read your biography in one sitting. And I couldn't put the book down because it captures a lot about where we are as a country, also in terms of where we come from. But before we get to some of those issues, let's talk about you. Who is Peter Vundla? Tell us so we know you and know you better.
Yeah, oh well, Google man, I find it very difficult to talk about myself unless you bring out of me. Yeah, but I'm just I'm just a regular guy, really, who has been, I think, been lucky in many ways, and that luck was brought through maybe my upbringing, my education, the people around me, because I could not have been who I am, without the people around me. And I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. I'm actively retired. I try to be a philanthropist now and then. I can afford it.
Indeed.
If there's a bit of money here and there.
Yeah.
I play golf. I enjoy reading books. I do a lot of mentoring, which I enjoy very much. A lot of my time is spent on mentoring. And I am just a regular guy, All times I try to be a very nice guy.
Indeed. And I think we as part of the LeadingSelf family know how you've been generous, in a lot of with your time and with your mentorship. Take us to the early days. You were born in the Western Native Township,
right, yeah,
which bordered Sophia Town. In the early days. Your mom and dad were prominent figures. I mean, in society at the time. PQ. What were the values that you learned from early on in life from your dad in particular?
Oh yeah. Actually, my dad remains my role model to today. and people will tell you that I just not only look like him, but I have a lot of his mannerisms and so on. And so I would have watched him very carefully, and I'd like to believe I am maybe a bit of, there's a lot of him in me. But some of the values I learned from him, and my mother must say, but maybe let's talk about my dad, are the values of, he belonged to the moral environment movement. And the basic tenets of MRA, as it was called, were the values of absolute honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Those 4 pillars were the very foundations of what they thought people and nations should live by. Purity, unselfishness, and love, and so on. So from my dad, I learned the virtue of hard work. And he always talked about the dignity of labor. Whether you're a gardener, whether you're a painter, labor should bring dignity to one. And he taught us about the values of serving, to serve, and unselfishly. And he taught us about love, the love of your people. He taught us about hard work and those kind of things, and they will come out more as we go on. But those are the ones that come to mind right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I read your biography, one of the things that came to mind when I looked at your dad was this was a maverick. This was an independent thinker.
He was indeed. That's independence as well.
Independent thinker. Yes, yeah. To a point where, he went against the grain. Always. I mean, how did that, very early in your life with your siblings, you guys have gone on to achieve greater things independently, in your life. How was... And not forgetting your mom as well, because, the hard work that she put in, a nurse, but she also rolled up her sleeves
started running a cooperative.
Of women who were washing. She worked for the Menels, some of the biggest, rent barons at the time, doing...
around the names, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What... And I get the values, I get the... What were the impressions that you had looking at your parents at the time, which actually made you who you are today?
Yeah, ours was a big family, and I am the 8th in a family of 11. And the values we learned then, being such a huge family, were values such as caring. We cared for each other. We taught to care for each other, to look after each other. Values like sharing, because there wasn't much food and other things to go around. So we learned to share. As one of the values that we do not have as a nation. We learned to love reading, because my dad always was reading something. Because reading is absolutely important, because with reading your mind just becomes a sponge. You just suck up good values and wisdom and all of those kinds of things. And we learned good neighborliness, because coming from Western Native County, we're a very huge spirit of community. Our yards were clean. We were house proud. And every Saturday morning, every family in our street, in Freka Street there, would come out and sweep the street, the yards, and do the gardening. And my friends were great at gardening.
Wow.
And from my mother, I learned to love flowers, and I can identify, or maybe about 30 types of flowers. Just from what I learned from my mom. Yes.
Awesome. So let's get to your early days in business. So, and I know, guys should read your biography, by the way. It's quite an interesting and entertaining. I wish we had 3 hours to talk about, the trajectory of your life, especially in the early days. But your first venture into business was opening a laundromat in Soweto. And tell us the backstory to that, because I know you were also in the big Shabalala family empire. The biggest. Those who don't know, the Shabalalas were the biggest entrepreneurs at the time. In Soweto.
Having worked for Mr. Shabalala was my father-in-law. I mean, I learned a lot quite from him. And at the time, he was the leading black entrepreneur in South Africa. And so I was always thought, no, man, I needed to do something for myself and to be entrepreneurial. And so I looked around. I did a bit of research, which was, in hindsight, not too much, but that's too deep stick.
Yeah.
It could have been a bit more detailed.
Yeah.
And I looked around and I saw a need for people to have their laundry done. And having come from the US and seen how laundromats function, and I thought, no, let me start a coin-operated laundromat in Soweto. And this was done. I got a few partners, and we bought these expensive Maytag machines, and we started washing people's laundries in Rockville. But along the way, we found that people, or most women, in fact, were not so much bothered about the washing. It was the ironing that was an issue. Ironing is more of a problem for women than washing. Washing is easy, but ironing is a bit of a hassle. So we introduced some ironing and so on. But as the business began to grow too slowly for my liking, and way below our expectation, people, I think it was too early for this venture.
Yeah.
And for many people, bring their laundry to Pronto Wash. That was the name of the company. Pronto Wash, yeah. For them, it was like washing their laundry in public. It was passé. It wasn't the right thing to do. And there was a question of, you're being lazy. Why don't you do the washing by hand at home? And then a lot of people also were competing with so-called washerwomen. So most households had an auntie to do their own laundry, and very cheaply and exploitatively sometimes. So that was a huge competitor. So the business ran for a while, and then after a while, I shut it down. But important lessons were learned there.
Wow!
But it was a pioneering spirit. It was always been starting something new.
Yeah,
and we shouldn't be afraid to start new things. And unfortunately, we're not starting on new things these days.
Yeah, and I think you probably point to a very important aspect of entrepreneurship, that hunger and desire.
Exactly.
To start.
To venture into
new things. Yeah. And most of the time, some of these ideas live in our heads.
Exactly.
But we never actually get to action some of these things. Your journey moves to advertising.
Yes.
I mean, you are probably best known for being a pioneer in advertising, co-founder of Head Boys.
Uh-huh.
What led to your entry into advertising?
Well, yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had gone to Columbia University in New York, and I studied marketing, and that was the theoretical side of it. But I always had this idea of an ad agency in the back of my mind because I was attracted to marketing. So whilst running a Pronto Wash, the laundromat company, I was then approached by the true doyens of black advertising in South Africa, Madala Mphahlele and Oris Mbanda.
Yes.
They came to see me and they said, listen, Unilever is wanting a black brand manager. Can you avail yourself? We think you do well. So an interview was arranged for me to go, and we interviewed in Durban there at Lever Brothers. And when I got there, I was actually overdressed for the occasion. Totally overdressed, and I was in alligator shoes, and I was like, I owned the place, And there were these 4 white men in gray suits and white shirts, and started interviewing me, and but the final thing was I didn't get the job.
Oh yeah, and in fact,
as well. Yeah.
You write also that you're actually grateful.
Yeah, indeed,
you actually did get the job.
Yeah. So I got back, and then about the same time, then I was approached by another great black marketing person in the form of Sam Musikidi, who said, "Listen, man, Sarah at the time was at South African Breweries." And he says, "Listen, we have an agency here, an ad agency, which just doesn't understand the black consumer. And the agency is called VZ, and we think you should go there, and so that you can just bring a bit of insights into the so-called black market." So then I went for an interview at VZ, which was the full name was VZ, Vanselo Schultz, London Trudeau. And so I was interviewed, and I got the job, and I started off as a research executive, which was very helpful in terms of understanding a cross section of products, services, brands, and those kinds of things. And then I had the fortune also of being involved in a new business.
Okay.
Which was a rare thing then for a black person to be involved in. And so I rose through the ranks. I became a client service person. I sort of as an AE.
Yeah.
And then subsequently the company was bought by the Radfords Group, and we were called then Ogilvy and Mather, Radford, Seal, Tripp and Merkin. And I rose through the ranks there until I became... I became an account executive, and I became an account supervisor, an account manager, and then the next step would have been to become a client service director, which was now the apex of a client service. And there you have a group of people working for you. And I had hit the glass ceiling. I couldn't get there. And all along I could see white kids I had trained being promoted over me. And so I just looked around, and I looked at the white guys, and even my so-called white supervisors and bosses, and I said I could do better than these guys, you know. And at the time, Gugu, you know, this was now in 1990, and Mandela was soon to come out of jail. That's the thing about time as well. Time had to be good when you're an entrepreneur. So we saw the changes would begin to happen. It was a year before Mandela was released. There was this lovely mood about things about to happen. Yeah. And we thought we should ride this wave. And the so-called black consumer was becoming more and more important. And we were subsequently going to call the black market the main market, which is something I coined. Yeah. And so, and then there was this dearth of black people in the industry, whether in marketing or in advertising. And so the idea was, I thought, why not let's divest the various ad agency and marketing companies of what little black talent they had, and vest all of the talent under one roof. Okay. And that's how Headboards was born. Wow. So at the time we were talking to just about everybody in the industry: Alf Ngaleluma, Horace Mpanza, Eric Mafuna, Ruel Koza, Gary Morolo, Gawa, Serobe, Beatrice Kubeka, just about everybody who was in the industry. So we started talking about this thing every Sunday morning at Ruel Koza's office in Offerton. Sunday mornings, and we would chat and chat. Ultimately, the five of us remained. Yeah. And I remember Eric saying, "Guys, we've been talking too long now. It's about time, go and do this thing. Yeah. Forget about your corner office, your white secretaries, your company cars. Just go and do this thing." Yeah. And so there was Happy Nchingela, Dimape Sirinyane, Denison, Quentin Denison, and Dennis Mashaba. Then we handed in our resignations, and then we went and started Headboys. We didn't have a penny in we didn't have a client, not a penny in the bank. And you worked from your house in Diepkloof. A record house in Diepkloof, yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And you know,
some of the things you talk about in your book also resonates with, I suppose, many people who have found themselves in corporate South Africa. And that talks to, if you are Black, you must be a spokesperson of Black people.
Indeed.
And
yes.
it's something that you talk about a lot in your book, that, you never wanted to be positioned as that guy,
exactly.
When the company wants to develop products or thinking around the Black market, they come to you because you're Black.
Exactly.
You thought of yourself as a marketing guy, an advertising guy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and this was from advice from a white mentor I might mention called Dr. Ivan May. And he told me, he said, listen, and at the time as we were up, there was this apartheid structure called the Black Communications Unit within ad agency.
Yes, the language.
Yes, this was more of a language. They do the translations from white conceived concepts, English concepts, and then they do the translation. And when it came to customs, those kind of things, they go to this Black Communications Unit. So then I said to myself, no, I'm not. I'm going to be the total advertising person, and I must speak authoritatively about the so-called Black market, the Indian market, the Asian market, and the white market authoritatively. I must talk about all markets, not just the so-called Black market, because I have absolutely no mandate to speak for, at the time, 20 to 30 million Black people. So I had no mandate, I couldn't say. And at the time, very importantly, white people were treating us like we're all the same, we're just homogenous.
Exactly.
And that's absolute nonsense. I could tell you some of these crazy things.
Crazy things that happened at the time.
Yeah.
But also you talk about something as well around what advertising could potentially do. You talk about, does advertising reflect society as is, or what it could become?
Indeed.
So tell us about that thinking.
Yeah, you see, at the time advertising, you need to understand that Black people on television or print or radio were always presented in subservient roles. It was either a petrol attendant or a gardener, but never in aspirational roles. The Black person was never the motorist driving into a forecourt, but it was the guy that was pumping this thing, and it was a maid in the kitchen, not the owner of the kitchen. So we thought, no. And at the time, I think very importantly, there is a big difference here between presenting reality the way things are. That's how the advertising was. And we said, no, man, this doesn't make sense. We have to present the way things could be. Inspirational and aspirational advertising. And South African breweries actually were, in a way, the pioneers in that kind of advertising, where they had multiracial advertising.
Casalaga.
Casalaga with lots of advertising. They started introducing not just Black, but white females as well into beer advertising. And that was not their reality, but they were saying, this is how things should be, that we live in a multiracial society. So why can't Black and white people drink together? Because that was not allowed, So we thought, no, let's do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just aspirational or inspirational advertising we did, but we started coming up with multilingual advertising.
Yeah.
And because the SABC was very much into language purity, you couldn't mix up languages. You had to do if you do Zulu, you can't even throw in Xhosa or English word. So we stopped all that nonsense. We said, no, we live in a country where we are multilingual.
Yeah.
So we introduced multilingualism in our advertising, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Wow, nice. I mean, one of the when you think about Head Boys, the brand, I mean, it actually grew into so many other things.
It became a national brand.
It became a national brand.
We lost ownership of it to the people. Yeah,
Exactly. They started owning it. Some of us also came into that family through Muddy Assassins and Head Boys, from a PR perspective.
Correct, yes.
And we were part of that big family. You had major wins as Head Boys. Many people don't know that Head Boys designed our first ballot paper.
Indeed, exactly, yeah.
And you also, the SAA tail designed the whole.
Correct.
Tell us about some of those wins.
Yeah, hey, now I'm a big believer in social marketing, and I think that's my strength rather than brand marketing. And like I said, we're a country in transition. And we wanted to be part of writing the new South Africa, editor of the new South Africa. And we were involved in the first national elections, where we did some voter education. We did some voter education. And we won this against many established agencies. So we did some voter education, and through this voter education, we ended up designing the ballot paper. Even when we did design the ballot paper, it wasn't just going to be a standard type of ballot paper. Because of the high illiteracy or rates in South Africa, it had to be very visual. And we thought we should have on the ballot paper the face of the candidate or the party representative, the logo, and also little things like, do you do a tick or a cross? Because at the time and this kind of came naturally, we didn't have to do any research, because for some black people who are voters for the first time, a cross meant I don't want you. So we took because I know cross is still good. It could do a tick, as well, and it means the same thing. And so we designed that. So it wasn't just that, but we were also involved in we pitched for the national flag as well. And the one difference with our national flag thing was we had all the right colors. It was just the graphic that was different. We launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We worked on that. Then I was personally involved in the new colors for South African Airways, coming from the old orange tail with the springboard. Yes. So there were quite a few of those national efforts that we did. And as I say in my book, we were, in a way, midwives of the new democracy.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Your journey in business now takes also, you were probably at that time executive chairman of Head Boys. EP was running the operations. You moved to some, mainstream business ventures. And one of them was you were chairman of the African Merchant Bank. What were your thoughts or impressions of corporate South Africa at the time? It was during the time where transformation was becoming the buzzword, and change was, as you said, happening. What were your impressions of corporate South Africa?
Corporate South Africa was brought kicking and screaming into the new South Africa. Even till today, they have not come to terms with the new South Africa. We're still groping and trying to find out what is this new South Africa. But as I became known as an ad man, and I kind of evolved more into becoming a business person, and I, my profile was quite well known out there as a pioneer in business, a black pioneer in business, and I was then invited to sit on a number of boards. And I sat on some of the biggest boards in this country, like I sat on the board of Sanlam, I sat on the board of Santam, I sat on the board of Westbank, Centrachem, National Chemical Products. I sat on quite a few boards, and I became more of a business person than an ad man, and a lot of people started seeing me more as a business person. And during that same period, I was also asked to sit on the Black Economic Empowerment Commission, which at the time was chaired by one Cyril Ramaphosa. We sat for some 3 years coming up with this a commission report, and which, by the way, we need to revisit and for white people, I think white corporates at the time, they just was a lot of tokenism. They were not really committed to black economic empowerment, and because white people don't like to share. That's one thing we need to remember all the time. And especially we can't share what's stolen, basically. And so we some of us really got involved. We were hoping that they'd come around and understand, but we need to create an egalitarian society that there is a lot of unfinished business. Till today, there's a lot of unfinished business because the inequalities in this country between black and white is just unbelievable, and white capital still predominates, and it's totally unacceptable.
So so you've been part of efforts to drive transformation, as you say. You've chaired a number of initiatives.
Yeah.
BBEC was one of them. BBEC was one of them. You know, you talked about the working group. It seems that we constantly talk about transformation in this country, but there is no leverage really to drive and make sure the change happens. Am I reading the situation right?
Yeah, I think you are. You know, I've always said that, I believe, the ANC has always had some of the best policies, even though some of the policies were based on a very, how shall I put it, a document which was drafted by white communists, a document called the Freedom Charter, a document that African people had no input in drafting at all. We need to be reminded about these things, that black people didn't sit and write the Freedom Charter. But the ANC is so married to this goddamn document. And even lots of our constitution is based on the Freedom Charter as well. And it has hamstrung us, and there's lots of things. I mean, how can you say the land belongs to all who live in it? How stupid can you be? Oh, me. What is that? Anybody can just come in and say, "Oh, well, the land belongs to you." Coming, it's just like that,
Exactly.
It's such a tough thing, and I see the DA are wanting to change even this. They're saying the land belongs to all who are here legally. Some nonsense like that. But it's a nice try. I think but it makes the point. So I just think there is not the political will, especially on the part of the African National Congress, to do this transformation, because they are all fixated on themselves and their families and friends, and there's nothing about the people.
So, some of the critics of our BE legislation points to the fact that this is about encroaching into companies that already exist, but it's not about creating new ventures and new, that are actually going to demonstrate leadership excellence amongst black people.
Indeed, yes.
Do you think that maybe the focus has always been, how do we encroach what I would call white businesses and derive value for black people from those companies, as opposed to how do we drive a new trajectory in this country to create, reindustrialize the country and create new businesses, that can compete?
What we have not learned, if you look at the Korean example and see how LG, Samsung, Hyundai were started, these were government initiatives working with indigenous Korean business people. That's how they started. And I mean, look at what Samsung is today. And and this was Thabo Mbeki's one vision, I agree with, when Mbeki started talking about wanting to create a patriotic bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
And this is what the Koreans had done, where government partners, black business people, to start new things, because at the time, and still continues, black economic empowerment was really about asset swaps. We just buy into companies without creating anything new. And there's little, I don't know any company of any value that's been started from stress by, the so-called B beneficiaries. And what has happened post the new dispensation is we have had new businesses started by white people using the so-called black market as their customer base. You look at Capitec. Capitec is a post-1994 thing, and today is the highest valued bank in the country.
With 100% black
100%
customers.
Black clientele.
Yeah.
And there are a few blacks who have some minority shares there and give some kind of BE look to it. And yet it's just white monopoly capital in action there, unquestionably. So I think we need to start new things, and government must create a conducive atmosphere for that kind of thing to happen.
So some of the arguments around, how BEE has been implemented has circulated around the concept of meritocracy. That, cadre deployment has been the order of the day. It's how you shout slogans the most, you get the better, seat, whether it was through affirmative action and the likes. Do you think that maybe it's time we begin to think differently around Black economic empowerment and focus largely on meritocracy, and getting the right people doing the right jobs and getting those people to literally lead in driving the economy forward?
When we set in this BE commission thing, meritocracy was always assumed that you do not promote or give a chance to black people who clearly don't have any merit. There has to be. Meritocracy is inherent in bringing in new players, new black people into the economic field, and it's about getting things done better. When you bring in people who have been previously excluded, be they black females or black men, it's simply creating a better environment for advancement. You add better, and a lot of people like to say, sure, cadre deployment has absolutely nothing to do with merit. There's no doubt about that. There's no meritocracy there. It's about political affinity to whoever. But like I say, even if in terms of affirmative action, you do not affirm people who don't have promise of merit. There has to be promise. So meritocracy is kind of assumed. But I know political parties like the DA, they tend to say they look at only cadre deployment, and cadre deployment is not about affirmative action. That's an abomination. It's an abomination of affirmative action. It's not it. But when we talk about, and it's as much as, in the past 3-4 months or so, BE has been under enormous attack. White people just don't want BE. Hey, bye, Allah, man. Hey. And some black people have gone onto this silly bandwagon. You find this guy, Professor William Kumede, the nonsense he writes about BEE. But 11 trillion rands has been transferred. What's that money from? Where did they get that number from? And it's an attack, and you read the papers. White people just don't know this thing. And we as black people, we need to find and chase whatever white people don't want, because it has to be good for us, and yeah, they don't want it, and maybe we need a reset, not a rewriting, because if you look at the original commission report and the various pillars of Black economic, they're still very relevant.
Yeah.
But it's been the implementation of that document that's been lacking, or even the monitoring of all of those principles in the BE Commission report. And that's one big failure amongst us as a nation, where we do not have, we fail on implementation, we fail on maintenance, and those kinds of things. Yeah, but that's another story.
You've been part of initiatives, I think early on when BE was being conceptualized, or of meetings and groups that were getting together, and you were accused of forming a black Broederbond.
An apartheid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But don't you think there's an argument for a forum, and then maybe I'm talking about the AfriForum and type, but a forum that seeks to become a think tank around black empowerment, and I'm not saying black economy. I'm just talking about black empowerment. To have a forum that looks into that and drive some of these initiatives. I'm thinking here that one of the potential reasons where black economic empowerment has landed has been the fact that it has been commercial economic thinking. But I mean, for me, there's also the spirituality element around black empowerment. There's been, the philosophy, the thinking. Don't you think that maybe there's and I'm probably arguing for a more black consciousness, Steve Biko type thinking. But don't you think that to meet the world at a point where we could contribute meaningfully, that a lot of work needs to be done in terms of our own psyche as black people, our own psyche as, so that when we get to the money part, we're not stabbing each other in the back, we're not, and I'm not saying that we should be Koreans and Singaporeans and the Asian tigers, but what philosophy drives us so that when we get into these spaces, we are more impactful and we have more purpose and there's more meaning in what we do?
Yeah, apartheid has been very deleterious in terms of how we as African people see ourselves and the way we think. And we have, through apartheid, lost, I think, our self-esteem. We have lost independent thinking. At school we're taught what to think, not how to think, and we became small people. Some of us were truly and thoroughly brainwashed by apartheid, and we lost our, like I said, self-confidence, our self-esteem, and we need. And this is what Black consciousness is about. It's about self-love. It's about love of your own people. It's about being generous. It's about sharing. It's about caring. It's about pride in ourselves as a people. It's about ambition. It's about nation building. It's about all of those things. It's about selflessness. It's about us as a people saying, we're a nation of winners, and we're going to create a new egalitarian, equal society, and we will do this without any rancor, any bitterness, and a lot of white people don't understand that. AfriForum, they began to understand that white people want equality, and when we could have killed them for what they did to us, all we asked was equality, And but what they did to us was like unforgivable. But we have forgiven them, and they should be thankful for that and show a bit of goodwill. But what we see now is just they're still fighting us, white people.
Yeah.
They're fighting us all the time, and I'm afraid one day maybe we'll fight back, and it will be very bad for this country.
So I mean, if you look at, I mean, it is no doubt that we probably live in a highly racially polarized society. We, you know, I mean, if you look at the Trump administration, Elon Musk, and some of the things that have happened recently around the issues of the so-called white genocide, for me, it does point to the kind of leadership that we need in the moment. And I wanted to find out from you, when you read these signs, when you read the moment, what does it tell you about the kind of leadership that we need now to drive this country forward?
Hey, you know, the pitches, and this is not just South Africa, we're talking about the leadership deficit. It's actually quite continental. And when I say continent, I'm not talking about Europe, I'm talking about Africa. And I'm at a point where I say, screw political leadership. You know, let them go to hell. We need to take things into our own hands. And I have come now to a realization that we need communities to take things into their own hands now. Communities must begin to run their own communities and just screw the politicians. You know, and this is a grudging admiration I give to organizations like AfriForum, where you will find white communities beginning to do things for themselves. They are producing their own water now because the water infrastructure has collapsed. They're fixing their own potholes. They are producing their own electricity because government has failed. So it's about time we also, as black communities, must begin to look after our own infrastructure. We must do things for ourselves and not look to politicians, because politicians will always let us down. Will always let us down. So we need community leadership. People within the community must begin to do things for themselves. We need to look after our own things instead of just destroying them. We need to look after our schools, our clinics, our sporting facilities. And for me, community leadership is the way to go. And like I say, because as a coal face, it's not national leadership we need to look up to, or even provincial, but it is at local level where we can begin to improve our own lives.
Well, we are about to wrap up our conversation, and one of the things that you spoke about earlier was the values that you learned from your dad and your parents in particular. Do you think we share common values? I mean, like as a society. I mean, I look at ourselves in terms of where we've been. It automatically needs to be that we should be sharing, whether it's egalitarianism, whether it is Pan-Africanism, whether it is, you know, a common good for all. But it seems that we've sort of regressed. How do you think we need to deal with this? You
know, one of the mistakes we made in terms of choosing our so-called leaders has been, I think all the time, we have elected our leaders based on the principles or the manifestos of their political parties. We have not, as a people, begun to look at the character of that leadership, the character of that leadership, or of that leader. And if we look at a leader in terms of, does this person have character? And character is about, is he patriotic? Is he caring? Is he selfless? Is he about serving? Is he about love? Is he about for the people? Is he about patriotism? Is it about him wanting to change things, create a better life for everybody? And so it's the character of the leadership that we need to look at more and more. And a character is also an inclusive concept that covers all of those very important critical values to lead our communities, to a better life, not the better life that's mouthed by the ANC and other politicians.
Wow, thank you. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. That in essence, we are at the spot where we need organic leaders now coming from the ground. Prabita, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing some of your thoughts and ideas about, where we are as a country and where we could be. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. What do the podcasters say? Click, share, and subscribe. Salute.